So now it's time for our first research paper session of the conference, and this session is going to be truly hybrid. So our moderator, Mark Flannery at the University of Florida, was going to travel, but obviously with things going on in Florida, is joining us virtually. So welcome, Mark. I believe we just tested and you're with us.
I think so. Can you hear me?
All right, we can hear you. Thank you, Mark.
Great.
I'm going to turn it over to Mark in a second, who's going to offer some opening comments, and then we're going to go straight into our three research papers for this session. I'll also note that our community bank discussant, Janet Garufis, is also joining us virtually from Montecito Bank and Trust. Good morning, Janet. Oh, I think you're muted.
I am. Good morning.
All right. Well, great. So we're just going to jump right in. Mark, I will turn it over to you, and then from there we will jump into our three research sessions. So, Mark,
okay,
all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you. I do wish I were there with you, but nature had a different idea, and I missed the opportunity to interact with all of you, particularly these three people who are going to present their very interesting papers. So what we've got is three papers, all having to do with information processing in some sense. And if lending isn't about information processing, I don't know what it's about. So these are all very tightly related, even though they look like they're about different topics. So I'll just begin in the order that they are presented in the agenda. And we'll start with Amanda talking about her joint authored paper on bank monitoring with on-site inspections. And you've got a clock there, right, Amanda? You got 15 minutes?
Is Amanda on mute?
See, is that better?
Yeah.
Much better.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So my name is Amanda Heitz, and I'm an assistant professor of finance at Tulane University and an FDIC visiting scholar. I'd like to very sincerely thank the conference organizers for giving me the opportunity to present my work, especially after Governor Bowman's incredible keynote speech. This is joint work with Alex Uffer and Chris Martin, both at the FDIC. So as such, the usual disclaimer applies. The paper is titled Bank Monitoring with On-Site Inspections. All right, so as we heard about in Governor Bowman's speech, an increasing amount of lending activity is migrating away from banks and into non-banks and fintechs. And we see this happening in a variety of different lending products. Banks are increasingly becoming concentrated in just a few types of loan categories. And really, a bank may showcase its strength in places where other non-bank banks and fintechs have chosen not to enter. So just to illustrate, this is call report data. And you can see that especially for small banks, they're becoming increasingly concentrated in commercial real estate lending. This is a very risky type of lending, and it was a primary contributor to bank failures during the financial crisis. So this leads to the next question of why do we even care about banks? What is so special about a bank? Why are we all here at a conference that is specifically talking about banks? The academic literature has determined that there are three primary reasons why banks are special. The first one is that they have superior lending technologies. The second one is a superior ability to match up deposit taking and loan making. And then the third one, which is where I'm going to focus my paper, is on bank monitoring. Despite the fact that I bet everybody in this room has an idea of what happens in between loan origination and that final loan terminal state, the academic literature knows very little. This is an area where we are really lacking in understanding, primarily due to data availability. So what we're going to do in this paper is answer three questions. Number one, what are the determinants of bank monitoring? Number two, do banks use information they collect while monitoring? And number three, does monitoring affect loan performance? In order to do this, we are going to look at a portfolio of construction loans, the riskiest type of commercial real estate lending, where a bank has very strong incentives to make sure that these loans perform. These are unsecuritized, unsyndicated loans in a risky asset class that is a primary contributor to bank failure. This is the perfect place for us to examine this type of research question. Now, economists that do theory work, that is mathematical models without data, have a lot of ideas about how bank monitoring works. They have determined that banks have a competitive advantage in producing information as compared to other equity holders or deposits or depositors. They've also examined a lot of different determinants of monitoring, and they've shown that monitoring can positively influence loan performance. Yet empirical research along this dimension is really lacking. What the empirical research basically does is we have these stretches of monitoring, such as financial covenants or syndicate structures, and really a lot of things that we can't explain. We just attribute to monitoring because we can't really observe it. So within this paper, we're going to test theories regarding monitoring that a lot of us in academics have studied since the time of our PhDs, but have never been confirmed within data. We're going to show that banks actually use the information that they collect monitoring. And then we're going to show that monitoring actually matters, that it influences loan performance. As an afterthought, the construction lending, despite the fact that it is important to banks, despite the fact that it is risky, despite the fact that it is an area where non-banks have chosen not to enter, has been largely unexamined within the academic literature. So we're also going to look at the determinants of this type of lending. So what is a construction loan? A construction loan is a unique loan. So say Professor Berger wants to build a new house. Let's make it a round number. Say it's $10 million. He wants to step things up. The bank isn't just going to give him a loan for $10 million and say, all right, we'll use this as you see fit. The bank is going to set up a draw schedule. And as Professor Berger and his contractors make progress along the way on this loan, they're going to disperse more money along with these draw requests. The way that construction loans work allow us to do a number of things that help us quite a bit empirically later in this paper. The best part about this paper is that we can observe on-site inspections. So as Professor Berger's $10 million house is being developed along the way, there are going to be third-party inspectors that come in, primarily engineers, and examine the soundness of the structure, examine the accuracy of the draw requests, and then write a report and put pictures in it so the bank can analyze this information. We can see the text associated with these on-site reports, and we can match these to the draw requests. What the data we're going to use, again, I've mentioned that monitoring is very special data. We're going to look at data that were collected from a failed bank, did not fail due to its construction portfolio. It failed because of its single family residential lending, a very common reason for bank failures during the crisis. And this bank has a portfolio of about 30,000 construction loans that span 10 years of data, including quite a bit of time just prior to failure. And as a general rule, if the bank can see it, I can see it at the frequency at which the bank was recording it and obtaining that information. This gives us a panel of approximately 11.6 loan days, along with detailed information about these loans as well as the on-site inspections. Monitoring measures. We can see how many instances of on-site inspections were associated with these loans. We can normalize this by the number of days the bank held the loan in case there was a default. And we can also look at the time to the first inspection of that loan. These are our primary measures of monitoring. Construction loans also have a lot of very standard terms. So they have a loan amount, they have a term, they have a spread over the Fed funds rate, et cetera, many things that are familiar to us from single family residential. We can also see different relationships, specifically the relationship between the bank and the borrower, as well as the bank and the contractor. So we have many repeat borrowers and contractors in our sample. This is a little bit about our data, again, about 30,000 loans. Some things that I want to highlight here is that the average loan in our sample is about 13 months. There are a lot of loans that are exactly 12 months. The average loan has just over 12 draws and 8 on-site inspections. So not every draw triggers an on-site inspection. First, we're going to look at the relationship between origination characteristics and monitoring. We can control for a variety of different things, such as the origination day, the property zip code, as well as the borrower zip code. And this first table, all I really want you to get from this is that banks trade off monitoring with more favorable loan characteristics. So if you have a more favorable loan, such as one with a lower interest rate, you're probably going to be monitored more. And this is true for our whole span of loan origination characteristics. Next, we're going to examine the relationship between whether or not relationships affect monitoring. The relationship banking literature suggests that relationships are an important determination of how banks collect and process information. Much of this literature has focused on the relationship between the bank and the borrower. But as anyone who's ever done work on their house can attest to, the relationship of a contractor is probably pretty important to a bank. And so another thing that is special about this paper is we can examine relationships beyond the borrower. That is, we can examine the relationship between the bank and the contractor and whether or not that affects monitoring intensity. And it does. We find that that loans with stronger relationships, that is a borrower that has already had a previous construction loan, or a contractor that has previously worked with this bank, these are monitored less frequently, and there is more time to that first inspection. The next part of the paper. So I've shown you some correlations between loan origination terms and relationship characteristics and monitoring. But what comes next? So next, we're going to examine whether or not the bank actually uses the information that it collects monitoring. So this framework is a little bit different, and what we're going to do is match those on-site inspections to the draw request associated with them. We're going to look at text sentiments using traditional methods in accounting and finance, and see whether or not text sentiment affects whether or not the draw was approved or denied. Because there are multiple on-site inspections and multiple draws within each one of these loans for the academics in the audience, this allows us to include a loan fixed effect, accounting for anything that is time invariant. What we find is that inspections that are more positive, the bank is less likely to deny those draw requests. Where inspections are more negative, the bank is more likely to deny those draw requests. Good thing, right? So the third thing. So thus far, I've showed you some correlations about monitoring. I've hopefully convinced you that banks are using the information that they collect monitoring. So what? What does monitoring accomplish? Does this do anything in the loan portfolio? Does it affect ultimate loan performance and default? Using an instrumental framework, we're going to account for the natural endogeneity that while monitoring may improve loan performance, we may also see that bad loans may be monitored more and default more. We're going to account for this within an instrumental variable framework and show that monitoring ultimately leads to a decrease in loan default. So a 1 standard deviation increase in monitoring is going to be associated with a 5.6% probability decline in the probability of default. We have a number of additional analysis. Do banks use time varying information to to monitor borrowers? Yes, they do. We can look at collateral deteriorations, and we can look at how banks monitor in and out of failure. And we see that collateral deteriorations do monitor. So I'm especially excited to be presenting this paper to this audience. Construction lending is something that is really not very well understood within the academic literature, and neither is monitoring. And so there's a lot of room for more understanding. And so I'd actually like to call on those that are familiar with construction lending within this room to help me with certain aspects of this paper. I'm curious how you monitor loans. What actions do you take in between loan origination and that final terminal state of these loans? How do you decide when to monitor loans? What type of cost and benefit considerations do you use when determining whether or not to monitor these loans? And what do you learn from on-site inspection reports? What are you actually reading these for? So if you have information about monitoring, I urge you to get in touch with me. I'd love to learn more, as would a lot of academics, because this is really a hole in the literature. So just to conclude, we explore the classical determinants of monitoring empirically, a lot of these theoretical papers that a lot of academics have taken for granted. Practitioners, things that they know that we do, that they do as far as monitoring, we're trying to document within the academic literature. We show that banks use the information that they collect monitoring, and ultimately that monitoring decreases default probability. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Amanda. And trying to keep track of time from so far away, I commend you on the accuracy with which you used your time and the fullness.